Welcome to Porch Play Chat, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately titled IPA USA. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association, and as part of our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats, and these are conversations with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. You can find all the Porch Play Chats at ipausa.org. In that top right-hand corner. Be a friend on our Facebook page, follow us on our Instagram page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And magically, every Monday, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch today is Kathleen Seabolt. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, everybody.
So Kathleen is the executive director for Vanderbilt's Child and Family Center and serves on the university's Women's Advancement and Equity Council, which is always so important. She's a curriculum writer, trainer, presenter, and consultant, passionate about emergent curriculum, literacy, natural wonder, pedagogy, and workforce development, and especially interested in practical models that remove constraints. She served on the City of Nashville's Blueprint of Early Childhood, co-chairing the Professional Development Subcommittee, and is currently engaged in the United Way of Middle Tennessee's Raising Readers campaign, which is part of the Governor's Early Literacy Foundation. Kathleen lives in Nashville, which is a beautiful place to live, with her husband and their youngest daughter, and Bluebelle, the parakeet, and 100-pound, what is that, Akbash?
Yeah, it's like a Great Pyrenees with a personality disorder.
Wow, named Lucille. Wow. Well, I used to, right out of high school, I worked for a veterinarian and I had never heard of an Akbash. So that's why I was asking that very question. So Kathleen's going to talk to us today about lunchtime routines and how to use those lunchtime routines to help children develop language. So it's do play with your food, juicy tomato baby, how playful engagement during primary routines engages children's early literacy foundation. So I think that is a very wonderful topic because so many times I think teachers are so busy in the routine that they don't really talk to children. They're like, who needs more who needs more juice, who needs more milk, who needs more of everything. Yeah, so I'm so glad to have this topic. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I just think it's important to acknowledge that in the scope of human development, we spend a lot of time eating, and in the scope of childhood, we spend a lot of time eating under the power of adults that support and resource that for us. And those can be delightful experiences, or they can feel punitive, depending on the sort of primary relationships we have and the quality of those primary relationships. I think that engaging children joyfully with food sets them up for a lifetime of joy if we do so intentionally, and not just from a point of nutrition, although nutrition is important. I'm not really going to be focused on nutrition today. It's really about the encounter that children have with food and how the adults support that encounter to be positive that I want to talk about today. And I want to link that to early literacy.
Wonderful. We're ready.
So we know that early literacy is speaking and listening, as well as reading and writing, and that children sing before they speak. They have a music inside of them that comes out before they have verbal language for meaning making. And when we acknowledge that there is that reciprocal give and take, we can start our relationship with even very young children by recognizing that they're communicating very successfully with us through gesture, through the way they arrange their faces. We can intentionally teach them baby sign, which is wonderful. You know, children definitely, when they learn, food and more, it really supports them to feel heard and to get their needs met. But even before we have taught them some of those strategies and before they have verbal language, they have the facial expressions and the natural gestures that help us understand what they're curious about, what they're interested in, and very young children, and of course I'm thinking about infants and toddlers, are always very interested in what the adults in their world are doing.
Mhm.
So if we are teachers who are in the habit of bringing a big gulp into the classroom, we're associating children to a big gulp, whether that's our intention or not. We can instruct them all we want to about water bottles and hydration, but if they're observing us make a choice of soda, a 48-ounce soda, they're going to be curious about why we're so attached to a 48-ounce soda. So the modeling that we do in our relationship with young children is really important as well. We think about these transition times, and we reasonably in a childcare day, and I'm just making an assumption, a lot of our audience are people engaged in licensed childcare of one form or another. A lot of our childcare is flow of the day is spaced around a morning snack, lunchtime, and an afternoon snack. And for very young children, even potentially more frequent feedings.
Right.
And those comprise a lot of our relationship, a lot of our opportunity to engage, to how we speak to children or choose not to speak to them during these times, sets them up for success or does not, how we engage them in the language around manners and around the things that they're eating and what things smell like and look like, and how strong and effective their bodies are to be able to take in this nourishment. If we make that intentional language, that's an early literacy strategy. We're beginning to bathe them in vocabulary, but the vocabulary is not as important in the beginning as the relationship.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, sometimes when we're talking about infants in particular, when they are old enough to hold their own bottle, sometimes because we're busy and there's other children who need to be fed, we might lay them propped up a little bit someplace on a pillow so their ears don't get the fluid. And we might give them their bottle and think it's helping them with independence, but we're missing that relationship of holding and rocking and face-to-face contact while they're eating. And so I think sometimes we have missed opportunities with infants. With toddlers, I mean, toddlers are not shy about eating. They love to eat, all the time. But I sometimes wonder if we're so worried about, that every toddler room I have ever been in, and I was a director and a teacher for a long time. Every toddler room I've ever been in, as soon as you put their plate down, they start, or in their silverware, they start banging it. Well, that's a learning scheme. And so you might not want to criticize them for that. Maybe you sit down with them and then you hand out the silverware, but banging is a learning scheme, part of their cognitive development. So you should see it as cognitive development instead of frustration. And then lots of times you can just read those nonverbal cues on their face, or if they're able to verbalize by that point in time, you can see what they want more of. I always say in an infant room, babies should never have to cry because they're hungry, right? We should have picked up on that infant's cues and what they do when they're tired, what they do when they're hungry, and we should be ahead of the game instead of reacting. We should be proactive. So how else can early care and education providers and parents, who again are busy and might want to put the Cheerios on the high chair tray and then go do something that they need to do while they're watching their infant or toddler in the high chair, what else can we do to help parents understand that what types of interaction that strengthen those relationships, but also provide those foundations?
I think that's such a good question, and I appreciate that, and I want to acknowledge, and I know you share this with me. Our hardworking teachers don't have the luxury of working with one infant. They're
Right.
probably working with 3 to 4 infants. So being able to immediately hold every child that signals for that contact
Mhm.
is probably not an expectation that we can uphold 100% of the time.
Right.
So when we recognize that once a child has begun that respectful relationship with us, our voice becomes a soothing mechanism until our hands can become a part of that.
That
And
is just perfect. Exactly what I tell my students.
we can sing, we can even just affirm, I see that you're getting hungry and
Mhm.
I'm coming over there very soon with your warm bottle. Here it comes, and keeping that relationship going through the connection of verbal affirmation usually is a wonderful tool to help the child stay in that relationship a little more patiently until we can get their needs met. We also,
And it makes them feel like you've heard them.
yes,
You're not ignoring them. When I was an infant teacher, a baby would have woken up in the crib and I was walking and holding a baby with feeding a bottle with another baby. And I would say, Sarah, I hear you. I'm coming. Hang in. I hear you. Did you have a good nap? Right. So it's that acknowledgement that helps them delay that gratification a little bit. And that's early stuff
early. And
that we could be
we
doing.
we often require babies to be more patient than you or I would ever be over a restaurant reservation. Like I want to be affirmed that I'm waiting for my meal, and
Yes.
I'm the wrong side of 50. So if I need that affirmation, can you imagine what someone who's been on the planet less than 12 months needs? And so once we've built that relationship, our voice becomes a literal link to soothing and helps them manage their anticipation. I do want to coach caregivers, and I put myself in that category. I'm sure you do too. That when we're working in early classrooms, infant and toddler classrooms, that we build relationships for contact also, not around food. Sometimes there is so much to do that our holding, our skin and shoulder contact becomes only associated with food.
Right. That's a
And
great
so
point.
we really want to also think and build intentionally in times for singing and holding and facial exchange expressions that have nothing to do with the opportunity for eating, so that children do not only associate affection and love and contact and affirmation with food, but also with food, but not only with food. And
I
that
think that's
requires some intention.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point because, sometimes in busy rooms, and we can think older infants or toddlers, where biting happens because that's just part of the development. And the teacher is trying to care for the child that's been bitten, but needs to sort of find a way to contain the child that's been biting so that they don't bite again. And so they put them in the high chair. And I'm like, please don't do that. Right? Because then they associate being in trouble with eating
Yes.
as a way to release some of their anxiety. So, and I always go back to my mom. I have the most wonderful mom and dad in the world, the most wonderful people in the world. But whenever I didn't feel good, whenever I was scared, whenever I was angry, whenever I was upset, mom said, let me fix you something. Was always associated with food. And so, and that was from the earliest times. So I think we have to recognize that when we do things like that, even though I understand you're trying to care for the child who's just been injured, you're worried the child might bite someone else, think of something else to do. I always brought that toddler over who had just bitten someone and had the child that they had just bitten right by me. And I would say, oh, Jason, look at her tears. That hurt her. And we would talk about that. And then Jason would be like, oh, I just wanted the toy. I didn't,
I
mean
didn't
to gnaw on her. That's just all I had at the moment. So, it's a learning process that early, that they can see other people's emotions and understand that their actions caused harm and that they need to help soothe as they got older, I would say, we need Kleenex. Look, we have to wipe her tears. And Jason would go running and get Kleenex and bring me back some. And I'd say, oh, we need ice because see, it's really red. We'll get some ice. And maybe you could rub her back while I hold the ice off, those sorts of things to help them learn that empathy. And so, yes, we know you're busy and we know it's crazy in a toddler room. But think of the short-term and long-term consequences of every interaction that you have with them. We don't want to put Jason in timeout so that he can see the chaos that he's wrought in the classroom. We want him to have some responsibility for managing that harm that he caused. So without making him feel humiliated. So, it's we should all be paid like neuroscientists because the brains that we are building are really important and have that long-term impact. But sometimes I think we get so caught up in the caregiving aspect that we might forget those hugs that are so needed, or having a child sit in your lap while you read them a book, or singing a song with a group of children where they can do all sorts of big motions and have all this wonderful interaction with you. Those relationship building pieces are really the most important thing you can do.
And that it's all part of the learning. It's not separate from the learning. I think sometimes we get very trapped in this lesson plan mindset where when we're more emergent, we can be more intentional with what are the children curious about that's in front of them and how can we set ourselves up to be flexible and responsive to what they're actually thinking about. And it goes back to the tongue-in-cheek title I gave to the porch chat, which is Juicy Tomato Baby. Well, when we're setting up art projects in preschool to get them to squeeze and explore with all five senses, but 2 years ago we were discouraging them from squeezing and exploring with all five senses in the name of manners. And I'm not suggesting that we invite children to, repaint the classroom by throwing macaroni and cheese against the walls. But I am saying that there is a joy in discovery, especially with our very littles, as they encounter with their hands. Like, let's not be too quick to put utensils in those hands.
Right.
Let's model utensils. Let's resource utensils for the child to engage with. But let's not correct that use, especially with these little tiny muscles, until we've had more sensory experiences of the beautiful world that is food. And I love taking children outside, and I encourage my teachers to do that as well. And this is certainly the privilege of my own childhood. I had a wonderful father who believed in gardens and believed in children being in the gardens, and there is no food served to you on a plate that tastes as good as something you pick yourself, rub the dirt off of, and stick in your mouth. And so getting to be raised by that, of course, I want that experience for every child. And one of the things that I've enjoyed watching as teachers evolve their practice is when they take a class outside to picnic, they become both more relaxed and more focused about the experience of engagement the children are having. We do not suffer a supervision point, and there's all this supervision and safety piece, which is not unimportant, but I park that in the regulatory / licensing column. Certainly safety is important, and we would like to have a childcare day where no one chokes. All of that is important. Equally important is this sensory engagement and this sense of community, which is what a table literally is. And if you create a table by throwing a quilt on the grass and having a picnic, that's a beautiful way to explore. And I love the way that teachers lean in with this beautiful focus. There's so much more joy. There's so much less, I have to,
we're gonna have to sweep up. We're gonna have to, you gotta get them changed.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, all the.
You can cut out 6 steps.
Yes.
And nobody's there arguing with you. And if you have a wonderful licensor, which most of mine have been fantastic, who wants to even go on the picnic with you, they get it. They understand that this is both primary care and curriculum.
Yes.
And that's what we're just trying to do. We're just trying to create that bridge of understanding for the adults in the relationship, because children already understand.
Right.
They know that playing with their food is a good idea.
Yeah.
It becomes, where is that most appropriate? And it's incumbent upon adults to create the spaces and places and time for children to do that, and where it's not a problem, it's not trouble.
Right. And it's not too messy, or let me get you cleaned up right away. They need to live it and experience it. And they need to have, I'm so glad you mentioned the time piece, because I think the other thing we try to do in busy classrooms is we try to get to the next thing that we need to get to, which is understandable. But again, we lose opportunities for children to acquire foundational skills that they're going to need for later learning. And so if we can just slow down, when I teach my infant and toddler course, I say the most important thing you can do is just slow down. Things will get done, but your primary goal is to build those strong relationships with those infants and toddlers, not to rush them through routines. And it's a difficult thing, especially when the director says, you haven't cleaned up from lunch yet. You're like, no, I've been rubbing children's bags.
Right.
I've been building relationships. And so maybe that is the answer you can give. I've been building relationships. I can clean up when they're asleep. And it just, I think sometimes our focuses go to those routines because that's what's stressed for us. Your playground time is this amount of time outside, and understandable that you have to rotate kids through the playground. But the other big piece I think that is really, really important is that they understand that it's those relationships that are the most important, and that we're able to help those teachers understand that those routines are not as important as the relationship. So,
and that routine schedule is a tool. It's not the boss.
right.
And when we give it the power to be the boss, and I recognize, I don't want to pretend I don't work in this world. I understand we're sharing resources, and that resource includes time on the playground, and that means that we can't poach somebody else's time. I understand all of that, but it's still a tool. It is not the boss. And when I consult and I walk into a classroom and I see a couple children at the snack table not eating the snack, I'm just so sad that they're wasting their time. And I'm always curious about, why are they being required
to sit at the table?
Sit at the table. Now lunch I feel a little bit differently about, because it's an opportunity to have, to model proper use of tools and have language and try new things, but also maybe not for an hour, although for some kids maybe an hour. But when I see children at snack, it's like, because it's snack time, but that kid might have just left, 2 waffles with peanut butter and bananas on them.
Right.
They're just not hungry. And they could be playing Legos, they could be reading in the library center, they could be doing art, but instead they're getting in trouble for wiggling seated at a snack table. So I do think it's about respect. It's about how do we respectfully engage children. And if there are other goals, and we've all worked with children who we have some goals around children that could be low weight, and their parents are asking for support around feeding. And so we can think about, okay, how do we engage the child without creating an even more punishing relationship with food? And
exactly.
The power of the peer group. I know I can't sit down at a snack or lunch table if there are whole bananas on it and not call children on a banana phone. And I don't know if they think it's funny, but I think it's hilarious. And And I will call, I'm like, who wants some banana? And I will call, okay, Naomi, this is Kathleen, even though Naomi's two inches away from me. This is Kathleen, do you want a banana for snack? And then they just start laughing, or they like think I'm a really weird adult, which I am. But
Yeah.
I'm always a little surprised by food comes in such beautiful shapes and colors, which of course means we have an invitation of language to talk about shapes and colors, but it's also wonderful props.
Oh, so wonderful.
And children get that when they're allowed to get it. And so I love it when adults allow themselves to be playful. An overripe tomato from the garden.
Oh yeah, squishy, smells fun.
Garden. And then we just watch the toddler. Now the preschooler will kind of look at us first, like they already kind of know there's an adult in the world who thinks this is a bad idea. They've had an encounter with some kind of an adult who's going to discourage this. The toddlers, not so much, and they're just joyfully.
It feels so good.
So much fun. And I just don't understand like preventing that. Now I can understand, okay, let's rinse our hands off before we maybe go on to our next thing indoors. But that's just learning another step. That's not saying don't have this encounter. And when I even look at babies, and I know that I'm not the only adult with this issue, like all I want to do is nibble on their feet and Zerbert those cheeks, right? Or the little neck folds. And that's what babies and children are doing in the world. They are just encountering the world. And that first thing, Morris Sendak, our wonderful author, children's literature giant, has this theme in many of his classic books. I'll eat you up. Whether it's said with a ferociousness or with love or a combination of those two things, often his protagonists have some kind of example of it's so much, we have to eat it up. And somehow children are brought into a world where we diminish that.
Oh yeah.
And that's not what I want for children.
No.
Or any human. You know, they're brain doubles in that first year of life. And I was reflecting earlier this week that a 3-year-old child, that what they've accomplished in those 3 years with learning, growth, and development in 3 years is more than I will accomplish with my learning, growth, and development in the rest of my lifespan.
Exactly.
And so let them have the time, let them have the wonder, let them have the mess, the glorious mess of, you know, trying it and having these encounters. And, you know, make the table wider and lower and more fun. That's what
one of the other strategies that I always say, and we did it in 18 to 24 month rooms. Because children could eat on demand in the younger rooms. If they were hungry, they ate, right? But in the 18 to 24 and then all the way through preschool, we had self-serve snacks. So when you were hungry, you ate, which helps them develop that self-regulation, right? I need to listen to my body. Oh, I'm hungry. I'm going to go wash my hands, and there's snack available. And that was just part of center time.
I love that. And I know that sometimes there's regulatory constraints to that, but sometimes there isn't. And schools pretend that there's regulatory constraints to that. And I absolutely love self-serve snack and what it does for so many things, but of course, social emotional development, that sense of self, the sense for any child to feel capable and competent is so important. But then you and I know, just like, you know, figuring out the whole physics of it and the fine motor control and, you know, how the visual brings into it. And then if you could get 2 children there at the same time, now we've got a dialogue.
You can go back and forth.
Wonderful. I think it's one of the most powerful centers if it can be set up as a self-serve. It's really
well, wonderful. It was so funny. I want to get to the regulatory issues because I was writing a couple of chapters in a book called Learning from Head Start. And, you know, I would say all the time, self-serve snack. They, oh, we can't do that. You know, USDA, blah, 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 blah. And I said, that's not accurate. I did self-serve snack forever. I was on the food program. So I called USDA. And I said, here's how they're interpreting what you're writing. And they're like, oh no, that's not at all what we meant. And so I said, tell me what you mean, right? And it was children need food to be offered to them every few hours. That was it. And you need to make sure you have the portions that we recommend based on the number of children. And I said, what if they want seconds? They can have seconds. We're just saying this is the minimum portions. And so, it just erased all of the controversy about what the food program requires of you to do. So, I think sometimes we put barriers in place, like, I heard this a lot when I was a coach with early childhood programs. Oh, licensing would never let us do that. And I said, show me where it says that, right? Show me. And then as a director, licensing would walk in the door, and I loved my licensing rep. She was absolutely amazing. Martha Lopez in Colorado, love you dearly still. And she would say, I'm going to have to write you up for this. And I said, why? And she said, well, it's against the rule. And I said, show me the rule. And she couldn't find it. And she would say, oh,
it becomes interpretation.
It's the interpretation of the rule, not what's written. So, you have to be confident and know what the rules and regs are. And that's a whole nother conversation, because I think the rules and regs are focusing on sometimes the wrong things. Safety is important, but children also need opportunities to have manageable risk. So I think sometimes the rules and regs haven't gone far enough in some areas of health and safety and have gone way overboard in others. So
I agree. And states, and not even just states, counties are so different.
Yeah.
And then it's different on who's interpreting. And of course, we're not supposed to interpret, we're supposed to apply. But there isn't, we both know there can be interpretation. And to your point of be knowledgeable about the intent of the organization. I wish you would publish, like, send to all of us the USDA conversation you had, because again, we can lead a horse to water. The regulations these are recommended portions. These aren't, we're going to shut you down if your kid misses 3 of the Cheerios of this portion because they've said done. It's what you have to offer, not what they have to ingest.
Exactly. And I will. I've got that chapter.
Part that gets
I'll send it to you, because I've got that chapter,
I would love that. And
I thought, this is what they always tell me. I'm just going to go to the source. And the poor man was horrified. He said, what? This is what they think? I said, yes. Over and over again. This is what they tell me. He said, no. Oh, Kathleen, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. We should have you back.
I'd love to be back, but thank you for everything you do. And of course, I very much support the IPA, and we can't scream the word play loud enough in this world. So thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. One of the things that were one of my newest brainstorms, which the board and I discussed last week at the board meeting, was we almost need, I wanted to start writing op-eds, right? Let's just start op-edding everywhere. But then we decided maybe we need a white paper on a variety of challenges that we face in allowing children to have child-initiated, interest-based, lots of time, play, risky play, outdoor play, recess, there's so many, lack of screens, please, all those issues that are getting in the way and replacing play, that we're going to organize organizations to come together who are like-minded and write portions of the white paper, write their expertise focus. So and then we can write up and use the white paper as the evidence. So anyway, that's the newest where we're headed in trying to overcome some of these obstacles that teachers and families face around play. So anyway, that's where we're headed. So Kathleen, don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. To learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.